On today's video, we're going to be asking the question, should my church be writing worship songs? Stay tuned. Welcome to Worship Launch. My name is Zach Dietz, and today I am joined by Chris Clayton. Chris is a good friend of mine, and I was actually doing the math today, Chris, and I've known you for about 15 years now, which is crazy. Chris has worked on a few of my past albums that I did with my old band, and he's done some for our church here, and he's an incredible songwriter, producer, mixer. What else do you do, Chris?
That'll be enough to talk about for now.
But Chris lives in Nashville, and he's produced many guys. Shane and Shane he's worked with, and there's Big Daddy Weave. There's a lot of people that he's worked with in the music industry there. And Chris, I just want to start off today with this question. Should every church be writing their own songs, and why or why not? What do you think?
It's a great question, Zach. I've actually wrestled with this for a long time. I've asked a lot of people this question, and I never get the same answer. So I don't necessarily think in that case, with that being said, that there's actually a right or wrong answer to that. I will say this: I think the church needs to be writing songs.
Yeah.
Whether the meaning the capital C overall global church should be writing songs,
Right.
Whether the individual church should be writing songs, my opinion is no, actually. And I don't mean that in a very derogatory, negative way, like, no, you shouldn't be writing songs. I mean that in that we all have, the Bible says we all have different gifts, different parts of the body, different things we lean into, and our strengths and our weaknesses. And I think there's kind of this pressure put on churches nowadays, like you have to write songs. Like,
Yeah.
if you're not writing songs, you're not doing it right. And I just want to, from the top of this interview, like say, hey, let's release the pressure valve and go, that's not a thing. Let's let that die off, because you are no less of a worship pastor or a worship leader if you don't write songs. God called you to love on people, both on stage and off stage, first and foremost. And that doesn't always involve songwriting. And I think I think people need to know that's okay. I do think there's a mandate, obviously, to sing a new song and to write a new song. That's come straight from the Psalms. That's all over Scripture. But I think it's okay for churches to kind of glean from the greater body who do write songs. And I know that oftentimes those kind of get certain churches and movements get highlighted of where we pull these songs from, where there's a lot of smaller churches in rural and even city areas, like mine and yours, that aren't on the national radar, but we're writing songs for our church. And through the beauty of technology, they get out there and we hear stories, I'm sure, like you guys probably have, of people doing your songs, and so the idea is that the church is collectively putting into a pot of songs, for people to pull from. And so, to put it simple, no, I don't think you have to write a song to be a credited worship pastor or church at all.
Yeah. I love that. It just taking the pressure off. I think there's a tendency for those of us who are at smaller churches or whatever to look at these bigger churches who are doing this crazy amount of putting out worship songs every day. And, I think there's a tendency for us to feel like we have to keep up with that. And if we're not keeping up, then we're failing as a worship pastor. And I love that you to begin with, just take the pressure off of worship pastors. You do not have to write songs. And I love what you pointed out is that everyone's gifted differently. And so, but let's say there's a church out there who is thinking, maybe I do want to write songs. If you have songwriters or potential songwriters within your church, what's a good way to get started writing songs, and how do you identify those people that may may or may not be good songwriters. How do you get going as a church if you feel like God's moving you in that direction?
Yeah, I think honestly, one of the first things to look at is, as the worship pastor or someone who's in charge of leading the music side of worship for your church. If you feel called to do that, then it's so important to make to try to build a team around you who does that as well. If you don't feel called to do that, it's going to be hard for you to shepherd those that want to do that, because if that's not your gifting, but it may be others. I mean, can it be done? Yes, but they're going to be looking to you as their shepherd to help kind of move that, keep that movement going along. So, really, I would say really search your heart as a worship pastor going up. What are my motives for doing this? Am I doing it just to keep up with the rat race of worship songs that come out every Friday? Or,
Right.
or are you doing it really because you want to equip your church? And so what I mean by your church, it's really easy to get this kind of mentality of going, I want to write for the church and hope I make my song gets out to the CCLI charts and gets, played next to Passion and Phil Wickham. Those are great guys and friends. And I mean, they're awesome what they do, but you need to, from the very beginning, remember that the goal of writing writing songs for the church is to write songs for your church.
Yeah.
And so it's really kind of a heart check at the very top of the equation going, what is the purpose of writing songs in my body? What do our people need to be singing? What do they need to be saying? And what style do they need to be singing it? It may not be the same style as a Bethel or a Passion, and those are great people, but it's got their own bent. So that's step number one is checking, really kind of evaluating your motives and your heart as the leader of this thing. Secondly is, I think it kind of evolves two ways. First, people kind of come out of the woodworks and they see that you write songs as a worship pastor. They start going, hey, I've written some stuff too. And they'll start showing it to you and you kind of create that. And sometimes it can be very comical and kind of funny, like, no, this will never work. But you never know unless you give people a chance, is what I'm getting at. Just hear them out, because there are some people even in my church that I've kind of been like, oh, wow, I didn't know you wrote stuff like that. Like, I'm actually working on a project for a couple in our church right now that I had no idea they even wrote. I mean, he's been a country writer for as long as I've known him. And he and his wife have been writing this like worship stuff that kind of in the background. And they brought me some songs. I'm like, this is really good. Like, where are you doing it? And so some people are very forward with that in a very non-pushy way, I guess you could say. But some people are also very forward with that in a very pushy way. So you kind of have to just kind of weigh out both sides of it. But I think what I was getting at, I think people will automatically kind of draw to you if that's something you're starting, like if you're writing songs by yourself or introducing them or co-writing with other people come out of the woodworks and you say, hey, I've written a song today. They'll show you your songs. Then there's the other side of it where you're like, hey, I really want to get our songwriting culture here at XYZ Church started. You'd be surprised people show up who really aren't really songwriters, and some people show up that would never step foot on their own to show you that they're a songwriter, but at the invitation that they would. So it's a delicate dance, man, as far as like putting it out there and not really opening the floodgates, but also being very selective, because at the end of the day, you're creating a team basically of people who are going to help shape the worship theology of your church.
Yeah.
So you can be very selective about where they're at in their spiritual walk, where they're at in their journey as a musician and songwriter, because you don't want to go backwards. You want to propel forwards. So it's really kind of a twofold of really just kind of keeping your eye open as a worship pastor, but also just, not being afraid to ask people, because some people won't do it unless you ask them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we, several of us took a trip to Nashville a couple of years back to be a part of a songwriting weekend that you guys had called Kingdom Songs. Mm-hmm. And man, we learned a lot just from being there. And when I came back, so I already had sort of a smaller team that was helping me write songs here. And I just decided, you know what, let's throw this out there, see if there may be anybody else out there who has this gift. And so we threw together a song, called it a Songwriters Guild here at our church, and had about 20 people show up. And we identified a few other guys that really have a strong gift. And even helped write a few of the songs on our last album. And so that's just an idea, if you're wanting to move that direction. But
And I'll add this too.
yeah,
I think it's important. So let's break it down maybe to some nuts and bolts real quick. When you're looking for songwriters, you're not looking for the total package songwriter. So what's the total package songwriter? You're not looking for someone who can write melody, lyric, and all that in the whole package of things together. You may find someone who is very gifted musically, who's very well, putting chord progressions together. You may have someone in your team that's very well gifted as far as like hearing melodies. Then you've got the guy or girl who is gifted at lyric. And so like when you're looking for songwriters, don't discount them because they can't sing, but they're
right
doing it lyrics. So it's good to just categorize people sometimes. You don't want to do that often, but it's good in the songwriting world. It's like when I write with people in Nashville, it's like we're getting put with, like, I'm very strong melody and production kind of guy, and I'm getting put with a lot of lyric people. So it's just the idea of co-writing, which we may or may not get into today, but it's a good thing to kind of segregate that and not look for the total package songwriter.
Yeah, and so I'm more of a melody guy. I'm not great at lyrics, but I had one guy show up to this songwriters guild, and he can't sing. He plays bass on our worship team, but he came with some lyrics, and I was like, dude, these are amazing. Like, so we used some of his lyrics and just kind of tweaked a little bit, but man, I was just super impressed with how he could write lyrics together. And he's not a melody guy, but so we used those combined forces or whatever, and we wrote a song together and loved it. So, you're right. It's just because I know some guys who are amazing songwriters who can't sing a lick, so, so don't discount just because they can't sing or whatever. They may be incredible lyric writers.
And just to close that off, like even looking at a gifted team leader in this area can find potential in people. So, again, the total package is someone maybe who's got it all, who's been doing it forever, but some people just have raw talent. They just need a shot. And, and there's difference with someone who has raw talent and someone who has zero talent in that area. It's okay if they're not like, gifted in that area, but there's some people that just go, you know what, I can think like a songwriter. I've got kind of instinct. Like instinct in songwriting is such a big thing, like knowing where a song should go melodically or even lyrically, but they just need reps. It's just like muscle memory. Every time you write a song, you're going to get stronger and stronger. It's going to take 10,000 hours of writing songs to really conquer the craft of songwriting. And you probably never really arrive. You can always get better as a songwriter. So taking a chance on people is even part of the equation too.
Yeah, I love that. So as a songwriter in Nashville, this is a question I've wrestled with because it's so easy to go into a songwriting session and just say, okay, we're going to hash out another song. Let's just, whatever. But how do you carry the heart of worship into those sessions? You know what I mean? Like instead of the monotony of okay, I wrote 3 songs today. Let's work on another one tomorrow. I mean, because I know there are songwriters who are in sessions all day, and it can get monotonous. So how do you guard against that? How do you carry the spirit of worship into those songwriting sessions?
I'll let you know when I figure it out. No, it's a great question, and it really is something that every songwriter, especially in the worship and Christians genre, and we'll just hang on worship since this is what we're kind of talking about overall, but we all wrestle with it because you're right. I mean, I try to kind of guard my schedule of writing 2 songs a day because I feel like by the second song, like I'm pretty emptied out.
You're shot.
But there's been those days where I've been kind of like, I have to do it because of schedules of artists or, whatever it's been thrown my way. But I try to guard against it because I don't want to feel like I'm shortchanging the second person, because I pour everything into it. I want to pour everything into the song that I'm a part of. But even one song though, like I may write one song today, but I've got to write one tomorrow or even like 2 days from now. So it's like, that's 3 or 4 songs in a week. So how do you stay fresh? So, one thing, so I think there's a practical answer, and I think there's maybe kind of a spiritual songwriting nuts and bolts answer. One, I have tried to read more in this year. I'm not really a reader. I don't know how I got through school, honestly. My professors. It has never been a passion of mine really until the last year or so, and I've just really tried to read, take time to read, and not read for like speed. Like I don't want to read 20 books this year. If I read 5 books, I'm great. Like that's pretty good. But really reading things that are going to stretch me theologically, but also just bring freshness to truths I already know, and maybe just allow me to highlight, fresh ways of saying things. And like I said, I can write lyrics, but I'm more like kind of quality control, kind of like melody and production and big picture and keeping us on the track. And like, QC is where I like to land at. But, so yeah, reading for me has been a big deal. And honestly, just conversations has been a big deal lately for me, of just listening to people. And that kind of puts me into the second one. I think songwriters stay fresh because they learn how to listen more than they do how to talk. So for me, like if I'm sitting with another writer or an artist today, I'm going to ask, you've been in co-writes before. So like usually the first 30 minutes of a co-write or so, it's just like, hey, Zach, how you doing today? Like, let's just catch up. Like we may not have seen each other for like, 6 months. And so we're going to just answer. And so I've learned to just ask the right questions. And kind of, especially if I'm sitting across from another worship pastor like yourself, I'm going to ask them, hey, how's your church been? How have you been in the season that we've been? What is your church? How they've been reacting to that? And it's funny how people, we probably talked about this at Kingdom Songs, but it's funny how people, they let their guard down and they don't talk Christianese and Christian lyrics. They just start talking. And next thing you know, you've already got like, I've just trained my ear and my mind to listen for things going, he said this or she said this, and I just kind of tuck it away. And then the question goes, well, what are we going to write today? I'm like, well, you said something about blah, 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 blah. And that really intrigued me. And I've been going through something through this, or I've kind of had an idea for this. And then next thing you know, you're writing a song. And so listening has been a big thing over the last couple of years for me, and just asking the right questions, which brings freshness to it. So I'm not trying to just create something out of thin air or recreate, bring in 3 or 4 cliches that have already been done. I'm trying to bring in the freshness comes from conversation and relationship. And there's been times when that conversation has gone on for an hour and a half, and we may have not finished the song. That's okay. We'll finish later. But that relationship is more important to me at the moment than the song, because we can always finish the song. But at that moment is what's kind of a God ordained moment. I'm going to take advantage of it, just listening to them. So that's what brings freshness to me right now. Yeah.
And since you brought it up, I didn't plan to really talk about co-writing, but I learned actually from going to Kingdom Songs. I had never really co-written a lot until I went there and learned. And let's talk about that a little bit. How, when you go into a songwriting session, you may have all these ideas, but those other 2 or 3 people may have all these ideas too. And so you kind of have to go into those songwriting sessions with a humble attitude going, okay, I may not even get to shoot out my idea because these guys may have a better idea that we just roll with or whatever. But what does that look like for you whenever you go into a songwriting session? Can you lay out some of those details a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So it really is going to depend, again, kind of on each circumstance. Maybe the overall answer is, and we taught this, I know you've heard this, and I've said it a lot, is like always learning to hold on to your ideas loosely. Because songs aren't really precious. Song ideas aren't precious at all. Really, it's the people that you write with are the most important things. People in the room, they're the most important things in the room at the moment, if you will. And I'd rather not get sideways on making sure my idea is what we write on and lose a friendship out of that. It's really strongly wanting to write about something that day, or feels like that's what we're supposed to write about in the room. My idea will get written later. Like, it's not a big deal. So it's learning to just hold on loosely. And that's hard as creatives, because we just kind of hold things so closely to our heart and chest. Like we when people stomp on our ideas, we get, it's like our whole identity just got imploded on. And so it's like, and I just had to learn, and a lot of people have to learn over the years that, you know what, that's just a song idea. Like, it'll get written another day, or it may never get written, and that's okay. There'll be another idea. Well, I've learned to kind of leave those held loosely. For me, a lot of times, and I think this could be for anybody who writes songs. If I'm writing with someone, like if I'm writing with you per se, and like we're writing for your church, I'm going to ask a lot of questions about what your church needs to sing. And so I may have an idea, but if you bring an idea to the table, I'm always going to default to because you know the people that you're standing in front of better than I do. So like if the idea I bring to the table, you just say, man, I don't know if that'll work, lyrically or, musically in front of our people, then I'm going to go, you know what? Great. Let's just go with what you got and let's just roll with it. So at the end of the day, I'm going to default to whoever I'm writing with, and especially if it's like an artist or a church, again, holding on loosely to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember being at Kingdom Songs, and I was in a songwriting session with Mitch Langley and Scott Doda, and we wrote this song called Revival Sound that you actually produced. And I just remember us talking as three guys going, okay, what's God doing in our churches? And the common theme, man, I just remember at our church, and this is still happening today, but I just really feel like God is bringing about revival in our church, and some amazing things are happening. And at the time they were happening in those guys' churches as well. And we're like, man, let's write about that. That's awesome. And so we wrote this song, and it just came, man, like this. But I've also been in songwriting sessions where we get like one line and we're like, this was awful. You just feel like you want to give up. You're like, wow. So, but I say that as an encouragement to people who may be watching, who may be just getting started in songwriting and going, man, I feel like I can never get anywhere. And I think that is one of the benefits of co-writing, because you're surrounding yourself with other people who have ideas. It's not just you. When you get at a standstill, you can kind of rely on those guys maybe a little bit. And sometimes you don't get very far. You may not finish a song like you said, but I wanted to say that as an encouragement to everybody. But what would you say to worship leaders or worship pastors who are contemplating writing for their church? What would you say, maybe some things to consider before they go down that road with their church? What would you say to those guys?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always tell worship pastors who kind of like, who are wanting to write for the church or who are wanting to start a culture of songwriting at their church, like, there's not a magic formula. And if I told you how we did it at Gateway, if you told them how y'all did it at Evergreen, it wouldn't necessarily match up to how they need to do it at their church, So while there's a lot of great courses and there's a lot of great advice, things like that, every movement of songwriting in a church is going to evolve uniquely. But I think at the core, I would probably just say, just start it. Like, just start doing it. Don't wait for the stars align to just like, okay, well, we got to wait till we have 12 people on our team and start writing once a month. No, just start writing with whoever you have. Like, if you have someone else who's really passionate about it, we'll get together and just start writing. And I would say this, don't be discouraged if your first song is horrible.
Yeah.
And don't be discouraged if your fifth song is horrible. Like, it's one of the things I mentioned earlier, like with every kind of craft or thing you put that you do, it's just one of those things that you got to put a lot of hours and a lot of reps into it. The whole 10,000 hour principle is very much applicable here in terms of songwriting. And the longer you do it, the more you do it, and sitting down with people and getting feedback from it is crucial too, because it's going to help you grow. But you got to take that first step. You just got to write songs, and you're going to write a lot of bad songs. I tell this all the time. Like, we're all familiar with like Phil Wickham and Chris Tomlin and all these guys who write for the church that songs we're familiar with, and we know the This Is Amazing Graces and the How Great Is Our Gods and all those, the bigger songs, if you will, but we've never seen their catalog of really bad songs. And so people think that they just ooze out hits, if you will, worship hits. It's weird.
Yeah.
But we just think they just write a song and it's like it's worship gold, and they would sit down and tell you, no, they've got probably a Google Docs or a computer full of them that are just not very good songs, or they may be good songs but they're not great songs.
Right.
And so don't be discouraged because like the first song just doesn't feel right. Like it's a continual muscle memory thing of just pouring into it. As you're pouring into yourself more and more, and as you pour more into your songwriting, you will get better. That's just how it works. It's just kind of input output. And so, just starting is the biggest thing. And then really, like I said, it's building a team and finding a team. And that team may not be 7 people. It may not be 5 people. But if it's 4 people or 3 people, or if it's just 2 people, I know churches that just have 2 main songwriters that they write for their church.
Yeah.
And it will grow as people come to the church and as they find their, and they're also going to be discipling other people, hopefully, that kind of find that gifting. Don't be discouraged by small, humble beginnings. You never know where it can go.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Chris, thanks, man. I appreciate your time. I'd love to have you on again, discuss something else. So it was great catching up, man. Love you. If you're not subscribed to this channel, go subscribe, hit the little bell button. Make sure you stay notified every time we release a new video. Have a great day. Thanks.